Hey everybody, it's Tim and Steve from Phantom History House, and how are you doing tonight?
I am excited. It's the day before Halloween.
Absolutely. So we have a really interesting guest tonight with a topic really we don't know much about, so it's going to be very interesting to talk to them. Right before Halloween, everybody, welcome to Phantom History House Calls. All right, so it is Halloween week. Halloween is actually tomorrow on the day we're recording this. Very exciting.
Yes, exactly. It feels like, and it does this every year. We start preparing so early, and then we're still caught off guard that it like shows up when it does. It's the weirdest thing.
So obviously we are having a big weekend this whole week at Phantom History House, and you still could come join us. We have some rooms available on certain nights this week. So if you want to come spend Halloween with us or the other stuff going on this week, it'd be a great chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this previous weekend, we had our Halloween party, our novel soiree, which we had a blast. And thanks to everybody who came out for that and the incredible creative outfits and costumes. It was so much fun seeing what everybody came up with.
And you were Willy Wonka.
And you were the Scarecrow.
I was. So that's what we did this year.
Yeah, we weren't tied together, but we still made it work.
But it was weird because that costume had you with hair, which is really not something I'm used to seeing.
So, if you look on our Facebook page, you'll see that it has the top hat. It has like these curls coming out that actually match my beard perfectly. And it was a little disturbing.
It was very interesting. So if you're watching tonight, make sure and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from. And of course, this week we have a lot of stuff going on. Halloween, of course, is tomorrow. Yes. On Friday, we are making a trip to Sir Henry's Haunted Trail, which we love.
Yes.
And you're welcome to join us there just sort of informally. And then, of course, on Saturday, we're doing Ghost Stories by the Fire here.
Yes. And we want to remind you that also on Friday, our good friend Ginger will be leading the Oldsmar Ghost Tour in downtown Oldsmar. It'll be our first one since the back-to-back hurricanes that hit us over the past month. So we're excited to be back over there too.
Absolutely. And hey there, Chris and Kristen, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you being here. And we had a really unusual, interesting thing happen today.
We did.
A family came to, a woman knocked on the door.
Yep.
And you answered?
Yeah, I was in the library doing some work on my computer and I answered the door. And this woman introduces herself with a very thick, amazing Irish accent. And they were friends with the family that owned the home before we bought it and converted it to a bed and breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were very interested because they had stayed here with their, as guests of the family many times. Yeah. And so we were happy to welcome them in, show them around the house and what we've done and the changes. They were very excited about what we've done.
Yeah, it was the house was very different than it did, of course, back then before we went with our paranormal theme. So that was a lot of fun. It was kind of a cool way to kind of launch into the Halloween season. Yeah,
absolutely. And they were planning to drive by tonight and make sure and see the house, the decor out front. Of course, as you know, we have those special ghosts that are floating around in the front yard and lots of jack-o'-lanterns, and they're going to come by and take some pictures and see that.
Yeah, and that was actually the reason for them stopping by, to see if it was okay to take pictures in front of the house. And always, absolutely, yes, we love that. We love it when cars stop and take pictures and kids check out all the cool things we have outside. So
absolutely,
please come do that.
Yeah. So we hope that you'll see us. And of course, after this week, we will start transitioning into all of our holiday themed stuff for the holiday season. Christmas trees will be going up all around the house and lots of decorations out front. So make sure that you plan to spend some time with us and come see us during that time.
Yes, absolutely. Never a quiet moment around here for sure.
All right. So you ready to bring in our guest?
Yeah. So tonight we're going to have a really interesting conversation about the Druidic craft of the wise, which I know a little bit about because I read a little bit online, but I don't know a whole lot. And Ali Mushtaq holds a PhD in sociology and is a practitioner of Druidic craft of the wise. And please remember to drop your questions for him in the comments, and we will do our best to get to all of them as we ask our questions as well. So yeah, let's bring him on.
Ready to bring him on?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hi, Ali. How are you?
Hi there. I hope you all are well. Oh, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, hi, my name is Ali Mushtaq. Yes, I am a sociologist. I've done work and research in spirituality and minority communities. And I'm also a practitioner of this. I would say I'm a practitioner of things like witchcraft and all the other things that involve being able to exert one's will onto the world around us. And I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And I think the first thing I want to point out is that you are not in Salem, Massachusetts. You're not in the northeastern United States. You are in California.
Yes, I am in sunny California, where the weather is perpetually sunshiny.
Well, I love that because so many people think, hear Wicca and Druids and they think, cold, rainy Northeast or England or, European. So I think it just kind of shows that this practice, is global. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that in general, like polytheism and paganism is a religion or a set of beliefs that have been historically popular, especially before the advent of modern monotheism, and sort of went underneath and went under sort of the floorboards, if you will, during maybe the last 20 centuries, but now it's slowly coming back on the rise, especially in the United States, where you're having people practice or sort of move away from organized religion and practice more spiritual based belief systems as opposed to more organized religions. And actually, in the data that I was looking at, even as a scholar, um, we basically see this trend where a lot of people were focusing on their beliefs as opposed to and their spirituality as opposed to organized religion. So it's something that's increasingly becoming, important to people that are millennials, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And of course, like people that are boomers and people that are Gen X practice as well. But I think it's even more pronounced in more younger generations, especially since I think people are dealing with, things like questions about unemployment, questions of loss of control. Everybody feels miserable, and so pretty much people are moving away from things like God and church and Christianity, and they're going toward more spiritual based practices. In terms of my practice, I mean, Druidic Craft of the Wise is kind of the brand or the not the brand, but like the kind of like the history of where I'm from. But it's not it. But where I come from is from a branch called DCWA, the Druidic Craft of the Wise of America, and so we're distinct from the Druidic Craft of the Wise because the Druidic Craft of the Wise is an English-based organization founded by a guy by the name of Brother Eli, and the Brother Eli was a cult member. And essentially, what he did was he blended things like Wicca / Gardnerianism, Rosicrucianism, with things like Mormonism and Scientology, and he came up with a set of practices. And so, a woman by the name of Judith DeVrain came in and basically split herself off from the DCW, which and created the American version, which was a lot less culty and a lot less problematic, especially since it has issues with harassment within their organization. And
Yeah.
so she created a community and started an entire community over just purely kind of scraping off some of the bad practices that DCW had and separated it into a more contemporary iteration that's dedicated to essentially empowering individuals. So
So,
I'm as somebody, that's a millennial. Hello,
yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. Oh, you there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
I'm here.
not to interrupt you, but if someone were, we always love the elevator speech of, what is Druidic Craft of the Wise? What is the belief system? I mean, you talked about it not being monotheistic, so there's not one God, there's probably not one devil. Is it more like environmental nature based, like traditional Wicca, or is it more than that?
Yeah, so in general, I mean, witchcraft is all about using nature and trying to essentially use nature to sort of get what you want done, if so to speak. But the thing is that, like Wicca is more like the religion aspect, where essentially, like for example, they believe in the goddess and the god and the goddess. They believe in the idea of the natural cycles and seasons of, for example, like going from spring to fall to winter to summer, and like honoring those kinds of things, honoring the moon cycle, and the sort of religion aspect of it. Whereas witchcraft is like the practice, so to speak, where people are taking things like oil. They're not taking it, but they're taking like things like herbs, and they are using it to actually improve their lives or use it in certain ways.
Okay. So, and of course, here at Phantom History House, we are open to all kinds of interesting metaphysical things and practices and belief. So we appreciate you sharing this with us. And I think it's especially interesting that we're having this conversation the day before Halloween. I mean, it's October 30th as we're recording this. Halloween is tomorrow. of course, Halloween is celebrated in different ways by different people. Is it a special day for you and those who practice what you practice, and how so?
Yeah, so right now we're entering the time of Samhain, and the idea that the veil between the living and the dead is very, very thin. And so we take our time to sort of honor our ancestors and to sort of reflect upon the year and to really focus on the idea of, putting away things that no longer serve us in hopes to sort of plant seeds in the future, for a better tomorrow. And also honoring ancestors and focusing on the idea that we're just part of a natural cycle of birth and rebirth, birth, death, and rebirth kind of thing. So right now we are in these, the sort of the passing phase, if you may.
Right. So it sounds almost like a New Year situation
Yeah.
for you, almost as you're saying goodbye to the old and hello to the new. What do you say to people who are afraid of something like this? People hear witchcraft or Wicca, and they may have a reaction, like a Hollywood reaction of like, those are the bad guys. I hope we didn't lose him. What is your response to that, if you can still hear me? You still with me, Ali?
Okay. Sorry, I'm just moving back in, everybody. So I'm sure that he will be back with us in just a moment if you bear with us. I guess all the way over to California, we lost a little bit. So as soon as Ali is back with us, we will talk about it. So as you said, I'm interested in hearing the answer to the question you were asking, because I think, of course, Hollywood and in stories, there a lot of things in this realm are really vilified, and people are very afraid of it, and it's made to be all evil stuff. And that's certainly not the case, as we've learned here at Phantom History House, as we've met people who are doing these different practices. But I'd be interested to hear what he has to say when he gets back on.
Well, I saw an interesting meme earlier this week about, we have always been taught to fear the witches, but not the people that burned the witches. Why is that?
Interesting. Well, because people that burned the witches wrote history.
That's exactly why.
Right. That's always the history is written by the winners. So that's always part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is something that I've, as you know, I've always loved Halloween, and I've loved the history of Halloween. But since we've started doing this, I've seen like a whole different side of it with the people that we've met who are in the metaphysical world.
Well, yeah, I didn't have much experience at all with sort of the paranormal world or the all of the psychics and the Wiccan stuff and all the stuff that I've had some touches with it in the past, but my my overwhelming response about it is just that everybody's always there to help, and they're not trying to hurt anybody, but they're trying to sort of express themselves in a different way and to help and impact those around them in another different kind of helpful way, just using tools that maybe I'm not used to or don't know much about.
Right. I mean, and Ali was saying, and another question I'm going to have for him is, he talked about, using the energy around you in order to impact other people. He did not say to hurt other people, but to impact other people, which I'm guessing is kind of like what we have seen here at the house, is where these psychics say, I'm going to utilize this energy and help these people to find their path or figure out what's next for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
looks like he is headed back now.
Yes.
And so let's see if we can get him back in.
I saw him briefly. There he is.
Okay.
There he is.
Hi, Lee. Are you back with us?
That's crazy. Yes. Oh my gosh. As
No,
we said, the line
problem.
between the living and the dead is very thin right now. So all the crazy things are going to happen. And,
It's not a problem. So I think we should back up to the question you were asking him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that you heard. So I'll kind of ask it again in a shorter version. There's a lot of people who hear anything metaphysical or witchcraft and they get freaked out or scared of it. Of course, in movies and TV, witches are always like the bad people, or the villains. What is your response to people who may have that instinct to be a little bit fearful of what you practice?
You said in movies and people are getting scared or scared of it, or is that conception? Can you please repeat the rest of the question, please?
Oh, sure. So what is your reaction when people have that instinct to be fearful of this kind of practice or something that's a little bit different that they're not used to? What do you say to those people to comfort them?
Right, right. So basically, I think that in general, I mean, if you look at the history of the church and if you look at the history of these spiritual practices, in general, like the church in Western religion likes to basically control one's access to God and the divine. So, for example, in Catholicism, one accesses God through the priestly class. Now, the interesting part is the interesting part is, especially those with money and financial means, they're able to basically say like, hey, like, you know what, I like religion because, God is allowing things to happen, and, God, everything is the way it is, and we're not going to interfere with that because it's God's plan. However, with witchcraft, on the other hand, it's very different because you're taking reality and you're putting it into your own hands. So this is sort of what creates that sort of suspicion between the church and people that practices witchcraft, because in essence the problem isn't just the idea that we're working with practices that fall outside of things like Christianity and God is the Abrahamic God, but it's the idea that we're able to take control of our situation and our realities and see things happen the way we want them to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes it scary and threatening, because it's not just going against the church, but it also goes against a broader social structure where essentially somebody who's working class can go into and pay somebody $50 or whatever, and they're able to affect the change that they want, versus somebody who's well off, who don't necessarily who don't necessarily want that to happen, because for them change threatens their stability. And so if you're a witch, like, you're threatening that stability because you're responsible for change.
Yeah.
So this is something that's what I think is inherent in the idea that witchcraft is scary, is because you're able to control and change things and other people can't,
Right.
and it threatens people in power.
And one thing Tim and I were talking about a little bit ago is that what we've seen here in our world is when we work with somebody who is Wiccan, is a psychic medium, who does tarot readings, all these different things, the intent always seems to be that they want to help people. There's this big push to assist people to kind of make those, to help them see the path forward for them. It's not about putting curses on people and putting spells on people. So I'm assuming that that is a correct way to take that, right?
Yeah. So, hello. Okay. So basically, my read of that is, yes, I mean, in general, like, a lot of people are there and they exist to quote unquote help people. But I think in general, and I think this plays out to a very interesting moral quandary, and this is why I'm interested in witchcraft as a sociologist, is because it's like, if you were to push a magic button and, like, if you know that something bad.
And we lost him again, I think. It's loading.
Well, we can edit this later, but it will be like this. Okay, so sorry about that, everybody. I'm going to move back into position, and we will have Ali back in just a few minutes. And what we will do, if you're watching this, is we will edit this and put it out on our Conjuring Phantom History podcast without these interruptions, of course. So if you're seeing this and it's interrupted, we apologize. And of course, we can't control anything that has to do with the internets or the thin veil before Halloween.
I was gonna say, that is what he said. The thinnest veil is right. The veil is thinnest right now, and we'll blame them. That's what they're doing. They're messing with us a little bit. So I did want to add, we did, not only did we have our Halloween party this weekend, we had Mama back on Monday, and we had a Halloween week seance.
We did. We had a seance on Monday night. It was really interesting. Of course, it was wine and desserts and treats and stuff too. So everybody had sort of a really nice social time.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's coming back on November the 9th. So it'll just be like a couple of weeks, and he'll be back here doing more readings, tarot card readings in the library, and also the seance in the evening. And I think that one is actually on a Saturday night.
It is. And if you're watching this, of course, let us know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions for us, or certainly for Ali, as soon as he gets back, we will be happy to take those. You put them in the comment section of wherever it is that you're watching.
Wow. So I have a Halloween question for you.
Okay.
Growing up, do you have a favorite Halloween costume that you chose
like as a kid?
Yeah, as a kid. Like, what was your like?
You know, it was weird because like Halloween was a big deal, but it wasn't in my house. It wasn't a big deal about what your costume was. It was more a big deal for two different things. One was that it was a big deal to go out, obviously, and trick or treat and get candy.
Right.
But we didn't really fixate a lot on what we were going to be wearing. At our elementary school, there was this huge Halloween Day carnival, this big fair that the parents set up all these booths, and there was all these games and treats and stuff. And that was the biggest thing about Halloween to me growing up, was that we would get out of school early, or as soon as the school day ended, everybody went out, and there was like a cakewalk and the fun games, and you could buy a goldfish and, watch you die the next week and all that stuff that happened. But this was the biggest thing for Halloween to me. So a lot of times, you're probably not going to like this part of the story, but a lot of times we would just realize, oh, it's time to go trick-or-treating. What are we going to wear? And we would pull, not every time, I know sometimes we planned, but a lot of times we would just pull out the box of all the stuff. And okay, this year you're going to be the clown. And if you've ever heard David Sedaris talk about Halloween, I was very similar to it. He would often be a hobo, which is maybe not a word that we use these days, but that was like the default. Like, we'll just put on schlumpy clothes and smear up your face, and you're like a hobo. Right. And you're like, so
and anyway, a handkerchief over your shoulder.
Yeah. And we will get back. We will talk about yours.
Okay.
We have Ali back, so let's bring him back in. Hey there. Welcome back.
Sorry. Oh my gosh. Again, it just keeps on going on and off. But as I was saying, so, I mean, I feel like, as a sociologist, I think it's a very interesting moral quandary where it's like, if you could push a button and like knowing that like if you push it and like you don't know if the person that did you wrong would like disappear off the face of the planet or not, it's like, would you push that button? And so I feel like when you're practicing witchcraft, you're facing those moral quandaries all the time, specifically because like you're always in the tension of, do I do A or do I do B? Do I give if the jerk at work is bothering me so much, do I give this person another job and make them happy, or do I basically do a spell to make their lives miserable? So the thing about, and so for me, like I see witchcraft not just simply as, a tool to help people, but it's a tool to help myself. Like straight up, what I practice to make my life better specifically. And if, as a person of color, I deal with a lot of discrimination. I've dealt with a lot of racism. And for me, like I just use it. I use witchcraft in ways where it's like, look, I mean, the person that cut me off and at the market or whatever isn't gonna, or cut me off when I'm speaking. Nothing's gonna happen to them. They're not gonna self-reflect. They're not gonna know what they did is wrong. And so I need a way to at least psychologically tell myself that, what I did something to deal with this particular situation. And so, I think it's one of those things where it's like, when we're in the community, when you practice witchcraft, I kind of have a joke where it's like, everybody that practices here is like being in Texas, like everybody has a gun. So would you harm somebody if you knew that they had a gun? So that's how I feel when we practice witchcraft. It's like, okay, well, everyone here knows how to do X, Y, and Z. So do I want to be a jerk to this person?
But like someone with a gun, like someone with a gun, there's a lot of ethics and ethical behavior that has to go along with this, right? Because sometimes you just need to be the bigger man and let something pass. I'm not saying that you don't ever decide to give someone their comeuppance, but I feel like there's a real moral quandary to all of this then.
Yeah, some people believe that. I mean, I think some people believe like, oh, well, there's the rule of three and like 3 times bad and 3 times good with the Wicca and Read and things like that. And, I think in general, when you practice witchcraft, you have to you have to have a level of wisdom, and you have to have a level of restraint, and you have to have a level of, when I'm going to practice, I'm not going to do random shit willy-nilly. But at the same time, you have to defend yourself. Like for me, like, again, like I'm a brown person, I've dealt with situations where I was literally at a bar and somebody forced a towel over my head and started making fun of me as if they're like, oh, look, it's a Muslim woman. Right. Wow. So I'm in those situations. I'm in the situations of like people calling me a terrorist. I'm in the situation, and making jokes and things like that. I'm in the situations of going to a bear event and having somebody go, "Oh, look, it's Prince Ali. It's Prince Ali." And like, so I mean, this is my reality. This is my life. So when I talk to people about ethics, I mean, of course, like, you're not going to teach them about, like, okay, like, I'm going to immediately curse somebody. But the idea is that, like, and the idea is to, know enough to the point where it's like being able to discern, like, okay, like, is this a minor annoyance or is this a major problem? Because as a minority, I deal with a lot of major problems, and this is a regular thing for me. So, and the thing is, like, I'm in Southern California. I have the best case scenario. But I mean, the people that are practicing or living lives in, say, like Texas or Alabama or in some cases Florida, imagine like the things that they go through for homophobia and like the things that they go through in terms of their being trans. So, I mean, for me to sit there and tell someone to be like, oh, well, you want to protect yourself all the time and like you don't want to do anything bad. I can't ethically do that as a practitioner because I know I've been in situations where it's not realistic.
Right.
It's so for me, like I revolve around. For me, like my thing is like, listen, I treat you just as well as you treat me. And the thing is, like, the idea also is just don't be a dick.
Right.
So ethics is important, and obviously not doing random things is important. But again, like as a minority in America, I see things very differently. Just as, for example, when you have like things like hoodoo, for example, right? Hoodoo has its roots in slavery, and the fact that a lot of these practices come from people who've been put in a situation where they were literally like seen as property. And so magic and witchcraft was their only recourse in order to deal with inherently oppressive conditions. So so that's sort of how I kind of come at witchcraft is I come at it from the social justice lens because I don't want anybody to go through what things I've went through. And I want to make sure that people are able to establish boundaries and to make sure that those boundaries aren't crossed.
Right.
And that's something that I'm very conscientious about is to have people respect each other's boundaries.
I appreciate you explaining all of that and putting it in that context. That's very helpful to me, Ali, because that makes sense to me. There are a lot of people in situations you have just described who were basically powerless, and this was a way for them to protect themselves and have some agency and some power. And that makes a lot of sense to
Yeah.
me, as you described, especially like with the hoodoo tradition and everything. So I appreciate you putting that in context tonight. I think we have a really interesting question.
We do. We have a question from Kelly. And hello, Kelly. Thanks for watching. Great to see you again. And this is a really good question, too. So, Ali, how do you control yourself when you are upset? Because you are clearly ethical and thoughtful, but in the moment, I can be reactive, even if I know it's the wrong choice. So that's I think we've all
That's a
been
great
there.
question, Kelly.
Yeah.
That is. That's a great question. And so what I like to do is I like to but I learned this rule when I was in college, and basically the rule is I don't like making decisions about anything until I slept on it. If I had a good night's sleep and I'm able to kind of, process the next day, and if I'm still feeling the way I'm feeling, you know, then I sort of go that way. But the thing is, it's like I try to give myself time to process before I make any decisions. Also, what I do is, I mean, for people that do practice, I mean, I usually focus on the difference between engaging in energy work on your own versus going to deities. Because I think, when you go on your own thing, because in general, I mean, there are always going to be consequences to any kind of witchcraft that you do. So, for example, like if I were to do a job spell, right, technically, like I'm trying to help. Let's say I do a job spell for my friend that's seen as ethical and positive. Theoretically, though, I'm taking a job away from someone else. So there's in reality, like, it's always going to be a gray moral question of like, if I heal somebody, like, yeah, I'm going to heal my friend's grandmother, but then I'm also now prolonging her suffering and the fact that now she's living there. So no matter what you do, there's always going to be a consequence. And so you, as a practitioner, you learn to accept the consequences of the magic that you put out there because it's like, okay, like in a roundabout way, like now that my grandmother's around longer, maybe it means she's suffering more. And now it also means now saying now I'm the bad guy because now I'm prolonging her suffering because now her social security might be in jeopardy, her other things. So, I mean, but like, even if I'm doing something good, there's never going to be a situation where it's going to be 100% not harming someone, so or creating a detrimental outcome. So I always have to be prepared on my end to take whatever consequences there are. But at the same time, though, sometimes like it is worth the consequences, because it's like if somebody tells me they were sexually assaulted, I'm gonna go at them full force. Like that's just no brainer. And if there are consequences, I'm taking it,
Yeah.
because it's like because at that point I know I'm like, we know situations where people like victim blame. There's
Mhm.
situations where people put where the police won't get involved, or like they said, oh, the he said she said kind of thing. And it's like you can't do anything, you're powerless. And this is exactly what witchcraft tends to to help alleviate, is that sense of powerlessness.
Right.
And that's why also you can also go to deities. So like, rather than being like, okay, well, I'm going to make the decision, give it to a deity and see what they think.
Right.
And so really kind of focus and allow that to happen. Or even like, you guys work in the paranormal, you guys work in the spirit landscape. So you could give it to one of them. See if they're friendly with you, you got a good relationship with them, see what they'll do for you. Just
Well,
really
I
kind of,
like how you phrase it, about having a reaction. It makes me think of my early science classes of, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and you don't always know
yeah.
what that reaction is going to be. So I like how you phrase it that way, because energy will shift. It doesn't change, right? So it's going to go in a different direction, and it's not as easy as, TV may make it seem. That's what I got from that. What did you mean about giving it to a deity? I wondered if you could expand on that a little bit.
Absolutely. So basically, witches have the like. So again, as I was speaking about earlier, about the ability to make things happen and change, right? So practitioners have the ability to not only use their own abilities and their own sense of empowerment and affecting the world, but then they can also choose to establish relationships with divine beings, and then like some people might think of them as divine beings or spirits, or other people might think of them as Jungian archetypes or something like that. But basically, just the idea that you're able to lend the decision off to sorry, lend the decision off to another entity, or another maybe another being, so to speak, and then that way they're able to make the call. Because these, I mean, let's just say you do believe in a deity or a spirit that are all these other things. So it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna give this to you in your hand, and then given your all of your years, has thousands and thousands of years of experience, what do you think should happen in the situation? So then that way, like, you're not necessarily doing it. And then basically you can also say like, hey, like, if you think I'm wrong on this, let me know. But otherwise, have
Right.
at it. But
Well,
but
I like
it's
how you
really,
kind of have
yeah.
like, I don't know if hierarchy is the right word, but you're like, okay, might be too big for me. I need to talk. I need to talk to the big guy or the big girl, whoever might be in charge. Which also makes me ask about, we always hear when we talk about witchcraft, we talk about covens and groups and things like that. Is that
Yeah.
similar? Do you have similar things with Druidic Craft of the Wise? Is that how that works as well?
So again, like we see ourselves in the United States as DruidCraft of the Wise of America, so DCWA. So we're not the cult organization, just to
Right.
really make that
Sorry.
clear.
Yes.
Um, but basically, yeah. I mean, this is not just DCWA or the other, or this is not just our group specifically, but I mean, multiple branches of witchcraft in the Western world practice in coven, and or like, they're just basically small religious orders that are usually limited to about 13 people. But basically those folks, the people want to find a or organized way to practice, or they want to practice together. That's something that they would choose to do if they would want to do it. But basically, like, sometimes again, like, it's just basically getting people to kind of go into groups. And I also want to note that it's not just deities that people that practice witchcraft and Wicca go to. I mean, they could theoretically go with the spirits in your house, right? Because if you have like the haunted bed and breakfast, like, you could literally work with those beings and like learn how to communicate, figure out what offerings it likes, and like bribe it, and like maybe it could do something for you.
Right.
um and again, but basically just the idea that you're giving it to another entity, if you don't like using the word being, or like a higher being,
Right.
because sometimes some people might see them as equal, but so it just depends on their relationship. But in essence, though, going back to the question, yeah, some people do choose to practice in covens, in these sort of micro religious orders. And no, it's not like, where you watch like a, Rosemary's Baby and then you see the Satanists going, hey, I'll
Yeah.
say whatever. No, it's not like that. It's just literally just people getting together, and then, basically they're just trying to practice together, and usually somebody starts it, and then they're just kind of,
Right.
they have like a mini religious organization, and they go that way.
Right. I always look at it, kind of like, in any faith, there's some kind of congregation, there's strength in numbers. You want to be with people who have your belief system, who practice like you. And you probably, in my experience that I've seen, at least here with our Florida connections and friends who are in Wicca and witchcraft, they learn from each other. There's a lot of cross education that goes on in those situations.
Right. And there's a lot of nuance too. I mean, like, so for example, like some people practice Wicca, which I think is like a very popular mode of polytheism in the United States. But then there's also people that practice Santeria, and they practice voodoo, and there's other people practice Hinduism, because Hinduism is a very large pagan and polytheistic religion. And then, like, for me, like, I'm involved in more like Scandinavian kinds of work. So again, like, there are different kinds of practices. So it's not just, not everyone's a Wiccan. It's just that just happens to be one of the more like big named ones, if but yeah.
So I think this has been a really interesting conversation. So Ali, I do have a question for you. You mentioned already that you feel like you're a minority, you're a little bit of a target, unfortunately, which I'm really sorry about that. So I'm assuming that you must be sometimes careful about talking about this part of your life as well. Or, I mean, how do you manage deciding who to talk about this spiritual practice and that kind of thing? Is that a concern, or is it at this point, or is it just, this is who I am, like all the rest of it?
The thing is, I'll never get away from being Muslim, because I mean, that's defined my existence for the last, my entire lifetime. And it still defines it now in many ways. But it's just, I feel like this is just another component on top of it. Just because, like, for example, I mean, I can't unlive what I went through as a kid during 9/11. I can't unlearn the idea that I will never eat pork. And just because also, like, you go to church or you go to mosque doesn't necessarily mean you're not accessing spirituality. But I mean, a lot of those people also worship things like Santa Muerte, and like, again, like, for example, what slaves would do is they would worship the Catholic saints, but then in reality they would be worshiping their gods and goddesses. Just as, for example, like if you look at Santeria, where they use Catholic saints and angels in a lot of their workings as well, in addition to working with their deities. So for me, like, I mean, it's kind of a hodgepodge and so I don't really define my spiritual belief system as, I don't see it as extra, or I mean, I don't see it as like one or the other. I feel like it'll always be kind of who I am, and this is just sort of what I'm exploring about myself now, and especially since I feel like it gives you a lot more agency than saying I'm Muslim. Because again, like, when you're Muslim, like, literally you have to be like, you know what, like, you have to totally submit to God, you have to submit to his will, like, everything is about God and the universe. And yeah, and again, the tenets of Islam are amazing. So things like giving charity to people, things like, helping the less fortunate, things like peace and pacifism. It's a very beautiful religion, and it preaches amazing things, but it's just, I want to be in control of my life. And, like, for example, when I tell my grandmother I have a problem, I said, Grandma, like, this person harmed me. And she's like, oh, Allah will take care of them. And I'm like, no, Grandma, I'm going to take care of them. And she's just like, oh, no, but don't do anything wrong or whatever, because, like, they'll get it back to them, because Allah will get them. I'm like, no, he's not. No, he's not. He's going to let him do it. And I'm not letting that happen.
Now, wait, that's really interesting, because that's fascinating to me, Ali, that you just explained it that way, because I do really believe that there's this karma thing and that it does come around. And I don't think people ever get away with anything, right? I think that ultimately, so that's interesting that you're feeling like, I feel like you have to do the part that I sometimes do think they're going to get their comeuppance without me.
Yeah, see, and here's the thing about that. So keep in mind, like, even the idea of karma, right? If you look at Hinduism, karma is just okay. So Hinduism, when you look at Hinduism, right? Hinduism is based off the caste system. So you have Brahmins on top, and then the untouchables on the bottom, and then like the different classes, the castes in the between. And so essentially, karma basically explains like, so the idea of karma is just you're trying to not have any karma, which is essentially like to break the cycle of reincarnation. The goal is to not have karma. The goal is to basically they say that the good deeds and the bad deeds just sort of cancel out, and you just sort of exist in a state of nothingness. But then the question is, like, for example, like, what is good dharma? So dharma is like the behaviors instead associated with your particular caste. So, for example, from a Brahmin, it would be like not sharing a table with an untouchable. So that's a bad thing. It's a bad spiritual thing. So you don't want to do that because you're polluting your spiritual practice if you happen to share your table with somebody who's in the lower classes. So a lot of those concepts that we apply in Western culture are very much kind of anglicized versions of what we think of what a lot of people in India think they are. And so again, like it's interesting then seeing the way that like Christianity pops up into things like Wicca and witchcraft and these kinds of things because, it's like, oh my God, if you do something bad, like, the universe is gonna get you. Universe is gonna get you. Like don't do that because that universe is gonna get you. And it's like like I said before, right? It's like there are consequences, and sometimes it's just like shit happens, and you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And but even then, like if you think about like for example, like the people that practice Santeria or um other like European kinds of practices. I don't want to speak for them, but I'm assuming like this is not something that we regularly teach people to be like, especially like communities of color. We don't go, oh well, like if you do that to somebody, then spiritually this doesn't come back. Like in terms of their own practices. And again, I could be wrong on this. I'm welcome to be corrected on this. But even like for example, like if you look at Hoodoo tradition again, I mean, you learn how to cross people, you learn how to curse them, and you know how to heal them. So I mean, it's something where it's like magic is magic. It's like a computer. Is a computer inherently evil or wrong? No, it's like it's a person that's a hacker or a person that's a doctor that's using the computer to help somebody. I mean that it's just how you use it.
Right.
And
It's all about
so
how you use the internet
basically,
to do. Yeah.
right, how to use the internet. Like, are you looking up, porn on the internet, or are you looking up how to cure cancer? It's just nothing wrong about porn. I'm one to talk on this one, but I'm just saying that the idea behind it is just, learn and exercise judgment and discernment, and understand like when to do A and when to do B. Because even when I was learning hoodoo, the lady even said, the people that do things like sorcery sorcery or then the bad stuff. I mean, they're exoticized in ways because not every magical practitioner is going to work in the black arts, and so you'd be surprised. I mean, like my customers come to me for all sorts of things, and the thing is, it's like I try to do the best to basically talk them through things, but there are times where situations need a heavier hand. And so, it's interesting because it's like, like everybody comes to me and be like, I want to punish my ex-boyfriend because they cheated on me. Or what? I'm like, okay, so let's talk about this. What happened here? Let's explain. Like, how did he cheat on you? It's like, oh, well, because he talked to another girl. It's like, okay, well, we're not going to curse him because he talked to another girl, right? So again, it's just exercising discernment and exercising patience and exercising wisdom. And that's something that, we hope to teach everybody. But at the same time, like we can't like tell them that like, oh yeah, like if somebody like sexually assaults you, you should just forgive them and just do healing but white bubbles and white light. No, like that's
Right,
out of the
that's a whole different level.
Yeah, that's a whole different level, right? So at that point, it's like, it's like you find yourself giving advice where it's like it's almost like you are like a makeshift ask a therapist, as in like the Charlie Brown kind of thing. And not being an actual licensed therapist, but just the Lucy thing where she has the booth up. But basically the idea behind it is to exercise discernment and to be very clear and understanding that understood that there could be like not, I wouldn't say karmic repercussions, but there are things that can happen that are weird. Like I did a domination spell on someone, and then a week later, like I had a bunch of teenagers circle my car in a parking lot for no fucking reason. So
Huh.
I mean, like, yeah, so like shit like that will happen, but it's like I know that though, because I know I'm responsible for that.
Right.
So that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. It just means I should understand that, like, okay, well, maybe I could have done it a better way this time to get the same result.
Well, the
But
good thing
other
is
than
that
that,
you're
I
open to
mean,
learning those
people are,
lessons. When you do something, it does come back to get you, and you learn a lesson, and in the future instance not to do it in a certain way. I wondered if you could tell us,
yeah.
because we're running out of time here. I want to let people know how they can learn more about the let me get this right, DCWA, and you as well. Is there like a website or a Facebook group? Where can people learn more about this?
So the DCWA, I mean, Judith Dufresne passed away, and this was before kind of the internet taking over. But I will say to kind of visit some of the local stores here in Southern California, specifically going to places like Points of Light being one, or Phrase Hermetics being one. And so you have basically some of, like, Judith passed away, but her students now run the Roost, and so they've taken up the mantle. And it's actually really interesting because I'm learning about all these concepts through all these the elders within these communities, and they're the ones doing this. And so now, because I learned under them, I'm teaching these classes now. So I mean, they can tip me up, and then we can arrange Witchcraft 101 kinds of lessons and introductions. I can give them readings and things like that. But it is interesting because now what we're doing is we're sort of, piggybacking on the idea that, people need education, people need empowerment, and people need to find ways in order to make their lives better. And so this is sort of why these institutions exist, is to basically, capitalize on an age-old question of, well, if everybody's abandoning me, who can I turn to, and how do I turn to them? And at the end of the day, you can only trust yourself, and this is the way you can empower yourself.
I like that. It comes down to personal responsibility in a way,
Yeah.
and using your
Yeah.
own powers. And we could talk about this forever, and I don't want to keep you all night long. So I do want to say, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this tonight. I think this is a perfect conversation for us to have right before Halloween. So on Halloween Eve, which I think is perfect. And of course, if people want to reach out to you specifically, are you open to that? If they say they're here in Florida, for example, can we direct them to your website, for example, an email? What's a good way for people to do that?
Yeah, feel free to hit me up on my Instagram, Getting Wolfie. My professional website is for my professional website, so I'm gonna get my spiritual one up at some point.
Okay.
But essentially, yeah, I mean, they're welcome to come in contact with me. I'm happy to talk them through it.
Wonderful.
But yeah, I mean, we're all about learning. We're all about education. And we're all about trying to help people, become better versions of themselves. And again, like, you learn a lot, not just about, witchcraft or whatever, but you learn a lot about yourself, because it's like you learn, like, oh my God, like, if somebody was attacking me, what would I necessarily do?
Right.
And so it forces you to reflect on your behaviors and the kind of person you are. And like that, it's like, if you could press that button, what would end up happening to you, if that makes sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, Ali, for taking the time to talk to us. We really, really appreciate it, especially with the time difference from over here in Tampa over to where you are in Southern California. So thank you for reaching out, for being willing to talk to us. And of course, happy Halloween to you. And thank you so much for teaching so much to us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for, working through the technical glitches. I hope you have a nice day, or rest of the day anyways.
Not a problem at all. We appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again soon. But in the meantime, stay safe. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning in and watching tonight, and for the great questions. We appreciate it. And we will see you next time on Phantom History House Calls.
All right. Thanks.